You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show. The preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Welcome to the big show, my family and friends. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks for coming by. No. Enough of this clapping. Enough of the clapping. Actually, that should have ended a long time ago. Anyway, guys, we have an amazing author on the show. We're going to be talking about his fresh new book that's hot off the presses. It's so hot, it's still steamy. It's got that beautiful fresh ink smell that can get you high. Don't do that, folks. Don't do that. That's not good. But, you know, we've all been there when we were, in elementary school. Between that and eating the crayons, right? Everyone did that? Or was that just me? I don't know. 14 years of this show, people are like, yeah, he's the guy who was eating the crayons in elementary school. And the glue. The glue is always good. You know, if you mixed it with the crayons, you kind of got that nice, flavorful taste. I think that's what they call Thai food. No, I'm just kidding. No, I just lost 2 people in the Thai food audience. Anyway, guys, the jokes are there. But be sure to refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. There's a lot going on in the Chris Voss Show. There's the AI with podcast with Chris Voss at AIChrisVoss.com. There's of course, our YouTube channels, goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, the big LinkedIn newsletter as well, and also refer the show to the Chris Voss Leadership Podcast as well. He is the author of the amazing new book that just came out March 21st, 2023. Nathan Masters joins us on the show. He's written his latest book, Crooked, The Roaring '20s Tale of a Corrupt Attorney General and Crusading Senator, and the Birth of the American Political Scandal. He's going to be talking to us about his amazing book and the insights that went into it. Nathan Masters has hosted and produced the Emmy Award-winning public television series Lost LA since 2016. He's the author of hundreds of articles about Los Angeles history, and his true life, long-form story about America's first policewoman is currently under development at Amazon Studios as a feature film. He works at the USC libraries and lives in the mountains of Southern California with his wife. What, he doesn't like the valley? We'll get into that. He's the author and television writer. I'm sorry, his wife is a television writer, and their 2 children. And I always think that's funny how they're like, he has 2 children. People are like, well, I should listen to him and buy the book now. There you go. But this is a bio, so I read it. Crooked is his first book. Welcome to the show, Nathan. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Chris. Yeah, it's a standard part of an author bio. If you have a wife or kids or husband or whatever, you got to mention them.
Yeah, and I skipped over your wife's name because I didn't want to butcher it. Can you give me her name so we get that proper from the bio?
Yeah, that's tricky to pronounce. So it's Ksenia Melnick is her name.
Ksenia Melnick? Did I have that right?
Ksenia Melnick.
Ksenia Melnick. What a beautiful name. What is that origin of that?
It is, yeah.
Yeah,
it's a Russian name. Yeah, yeah. And she wrote a book of short stories that came out about 6 or 7 years ago about the Russian American experience and dealing with some of Russia's really dark history.
Oh yeah, there's been some dark history in Russia. You do say, and some of it's recent too.
It's not, not breaking news exactly. But
not breaking news exactly, but no, I'm sure it was interesting. So welcome to the show. We really appreciate you coming by. You know what's interesting is no one ever says in their bio that they're happy. Like no one ever says like he is a happy fellow and really enjoying his life. Now, maybe people should do that just so they can. I don't know. They can do a flex. I don't know. I'm just doing jokes. So give us your .com.
Next book.
The next book. Why Nathan Masters is happy. Actually, it sounds like a great title. It comes down to it. But you can just flex on people and just shove it in their faces. I'm happy and you're not. Maybe that's the next book. All right. Chris Voss is happy and you're not. Fuck you. Now read this book and you'll find out why. I don't know. That sounds like something that's going to flop like a lead balloon. So give us, Nathan, your .coms, if you would, so people would find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not a .com, but it's nathanmasters.me, M-E. And then I'm also you can find me on Twitter at Nathan Masters or Instagram as well.
Let me check with the judges. Judges, can we accept a .me instead of a .com? The answer is yes. I should have one of those dings from like a Family Feud that come up. So anyway, this is your first book. What motivated you on to write the book Crooked?
Yeah, well, so I've been writing a lot for several decades, but hadn't been anything in book form, and I resolved to do that around 2018. We were, as you might recall, we were in the middle of the Trump administration.
Really?
And there were all of these. Yeah, seems like so long ago, but
I don't know. I was watching CNN last night. It doesn't seem that long ago.
That's right.
The town hall. I was like, what the fuck is this? It's like what was that movie with Bill Murray, Groundhog Day? I'm like,
oh yeah,
this again?
Yeah.
Anyway, continue on, my friend.
Yeah. So anyway, there were all these questions being raised about, how can you hold somebody who's seemingly above the law to account? What role might Congress play in that? How far does Congress's power extend in reining in an executive that might be out of control? And what can the executive branch do? Like, might they violate rules or norms in fighting back against the investigation? There are all these questions, and I found this story from that had been really buried in the history books from 100 years ago. Everybody sort of knows about, if they know about Warren Harding at all, they know that President Warren G. Harding is usually ranked last on presidential ranking lists. He's not very well remembered. He's not one of the worst presidents in U.S. history.
Wow.
So I started going there, but then I found out that he had this, Attorney General who was essentially his political protector, his political fixer as Attorney General. He had been his campaign manager. His name is Harry Daugherty. He had taken Warren Harding under his wing several decades before, got him elected lieutenant governor in Ohio, got him elected to the United States Senate, and eventually got him elected president against all odds, because Warren Harding was sort of the dark horse candidate in 1920.
He's like the William Barr of the 20s, huh?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, the difference is that Daugherty and Harding, they were like this. Their ties went deep.
Wow.
But so I came across the story of Daugherty. That was interesting. But then when I found that there was a United States senator freshly elected to the Senate, this young idealistic guy, the original maverick in the Senate, he launched a congressional investigation into this attorney general and all of the corruption that was alleged against him and against the Department of Justice. And then when the senator gets a little too close to the truth, he finds himself in the legal crosshairs of the Department of Justice. I thought, there's a great story. I got to write that book.
There you go. And you bill it as the birth of the American political scandal. Were there no political scandals before this, or why did you?
No, not at all.
Pointed as that. Okay.
Yeah, of course there were. Of course there were scandals before this. But
Washington chopped down that cherry tree and lied about it. I remember that.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, there was the Hamilton and Burr, and of course, like the really contentious election in 1800 between Jefferson and Adams, where newspapers tossed slime at each other. But so I qualify it in the book. Obviously, really.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I qualified in the book. My subtitle was really long enough, so I couldn't qualify it anymore. But yeah, I'm speaking of the birth of the sort of the modern political scandal that all of America follows. This salacious gossip. Everybody's talking about it every day. It's in the newspapers. You talk about it around the water cooler. It was on the radio then. Today it's on TV or in podcasts or whatever. This was the first time when all of America was really connected to what was happening in the nation's capital in real time. Because of innovations in journalism, because of the rise of tabloids, because of the rise of radio. And the senator in my story, Burton Wheeler, exploited that. Like he played to popular opinion. In fact, he decided ultimately that the Attorney General had broken the law many times, but he probably could never be prosecuted in court, sent to jail. He's just effectively above the law. Instead, the senator tried him in the court of public opinion. That's, of course, that's something that congressional investigators have done ever since.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of built the foundation out for that.
Yep.
And I imagine this is the age of where newspaper and media and who was the gentleman who controlled a lot of the newspapers back in the day?
Hearst, William Randolph Hearst.
William Randolph Hearst. So this is the age of that too, as well.
It is, and this actually didn't make it into the book, but William Randolph Hearst was originally quite supportive of this investigation into the Attorney General. Wow. And then the Attorney General, and this was the way the Attorney General operated, Harry Daugherty got some dirt on William Randolph Hearst. I guess Hearst had a mistress, and basically got that news to Hearst, and suddenly all of the Hearst newspapers were no longer supportive of this investigation. They didn't cover it anymore. That's how the Attorney General worked. And
wow.
That's how the world worked.
and so they couldn't find a public jury that would probably convict him. Was that it, or it just didn't seem like anything was stickable? You know, we had a lot of that in the Trump years where nothing would stick. I mean, I think we're still kind of going through it.
Yeah, it's very similar to Trump in that, Trump, legally, at least according to the Department of Justice official policy, legally, a sitting president cannot be prosecuted, cannot be indicted. That's not the case for an attorney general, but you have to realize that the attorney general controls the machinery for federal prosecutions, right? He's the one who ultimately approves the indictment or can suppress an indictment or an investigation. So effectively, the attorney general was above the law. Now, I should point out that later on, after the events of my book, he was prosecuted. His successors were a little bit more noble than he was. They put him on trial. He had 2 different trials. They both ended in hung juries.
Wow.
So he really never did face justice.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And then I think you cover the rise of J. Edgar Hoover, right?
Yeah, Hoover is a character throughout a lot of this book here. Now, in the 1920s, in 1923-24, when this book takes place, he's young. He's in his 20s. This fresh face. He's not like the J. Edgar Hoover with the bloated face and the
dress wearing.
He's not the J. Edgar Hoover that you imagine. He's this fresh face, almost handsome young lawyer who was America's most famous radical hunter during World War I and the years after. But he was the deputy director of the Bureau of Investigation, which later became the FBI.
Yeah.
And
I think they're calling me right now. No, I'm just kidding. The dress joke. I don't know.
Well, one of the ultimate ironies about this book is that, they have a file on everybody, Chris.
I'm sure they do on me.
One of the great ironies of this book is that, Burton Wheeler, the senator, was trying to root out corruption in the Department of Justice and thought that he had accomplished that. But in the end, one of the direct consequences of investigation was that J. Edgar Hoover became the director of what became the FBI.
Really?
And So
this brought that right into it, huh?
This is why Hoover ended up running the department or the FBI for several decades. Yeah.
Wow. Hi, folks. Here's Voss here with a little station break. Hope you're enjoying the show so far. We'll resume here in a second. I'd like to invite you to come to my coaching, speaking, and training courses website. You can also see our new podcast over there at chrisvossleadershipinstitute.com. Over there, you can find all the different stuff that we do for speaking engagements if you'd like to hire me, training courses that we offer, and coaching for leadership, management, entrepreneurism, podcasting, corporate stuff. With over 35 years of experience in business and running companies as CEO, I think I can offer a wonderful breadth of information and knowledge to you, or anyone that you want to invite me to for your company. Thanks for tuning in. We certainly appreciate you listening to the show, and be sure to check out chrisvossleadershipinstitute.com. Now back to the show. It's interesting to me how all these things tie together, and one thing behooves the other, and the cause and effect of all sorts of interesting things. And sometimes the result is not better. Maybe, I don't know. You can look at the long run of Hoover and try and decide good, bad, and evil. That's probably another book.
It is actually. Somebody just wrote that, Beverly Gage. It's an excellent.
Wow.
From what I hear, I actually haven't read it myself, but not yet. But it's an excellent biography of J. Edgar Hoover. But you're right. You're right that people are complicated. So Hoover, he succeeded a man named Billy Burns, who was at the time America's most famous detective. He was called America's Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle. He was so good at solving mysteries that people thought he had supernatural abilities. But he was also really good friends with Harry Daugherty and would do anything in running the Bureau of Investigation, later the FBI, in protecting Harry Daugherty. So he was out, and it was Burns that Hoover succeeded. And Hoover, to his credit, when he took office, he professionalized the Bureau. He got rid of all of the sort of shady private detective types, including like con artists and just criminals who were in the Bureau, and hired a lot of lawyers and accountants, and made sure that everybody wore white shirt with a tie and a suit jacket, and for a while kept the Bureau out of politics. Ultimately, of course, the FBI came to be a political force in its own right. Hoover willingly served presidents from FDR to Lyndon Johnson to Richard Nixon. He was really good friends with Richard Nixon. Yeah. And of course, he collected dirt on everybody and held that over them, and made himself virtually irreplaceable.
Yeah, it was interesting how that whole gameplay. So tease out to us a couple. It's billed as packed with political intrigue, salacious scandal, which everyone kind of likes to read about, and no shortage of lessons for our political discord. Give us some tease outs from the book, that if you would.
Yeah. So one of the great characters I just referred to, shady private detectives, is this man named Gaston Means, who was a con artist, sort of an opportunist. He spied for Germany against America during World War I, before the U.S. entered World War I. But he was likely. I mean, he bragged that that he'd been accused but never convicted of every crime in the books up to and including murder. Wow. And this was before he was hired on to the Bureau of Investigation. He was he was excellent as a detective in finding, in revealing, exposing secret information, the information that people wanted to keep hidden. So he served Harry Daugherty and Billy Burns and the Bureau of Investigation really well. But he's not the kind of man who would be welcome in the FBI today, and sort of he basically had no morals. He was a psychopath and a con artist, and so he ends up becoming one of the major witnesses against Harry Daugherty in these huge, sensational hearings against the Attorney General. These were hearings that were followed, as I said, by everybody across the country. The room was packed with newspaper reporters. People heard about it on the news, and it went a long way to shocking the American public into how corrupt their government, and especially their Department of Justice, was. And ultimately, it set the Department of Justice on a better path. Right? The department. I mean, no institution is perfect, but today the Department of Justice is made up of people who generally uphold the rule of law, and they have they want to do the best for their country and not protect the political interests of the sitting president or of the Attorney General. Yeah. But that's a lot of that's because of this investigation.
There you go. And I mean, the court of public opinion, as you put it, the congressional hearings, and using that as a way to litigate or prosecute a case, has held a lot of power over the years. I mean, the famous McCarthy hearings with where the senator says to him, McCarthy, I can't have the quote right on exact, but have shame. And that led to the downfall of the McCarthy hearings and exposing McCarthy for what it was. Sadly, now it seems like, one of the lessons being derived from your book is that it seems like the American public doesn't care about those so much. I mean, you see the impeachment hearings of Donald Trump and other things, and people just don't care. I mean, they don't even watch it really, I think, anymore.
Yeah, there's something about the way we're fractured politically today as a country. It wasn't the case in the 1920s. There was people could agree on basic facts that were exposed in a congressional investigation, and I mean you see that especially with the January 6th investigation in the House of Representatives, where they were that House committee was actually really took a page from Burton Wheeler's playbook and really tried to make the case, and they had the benefit of television too. But you're right. They did an admirable job, but ultimately the country didn't really pay too much attention. Didn't really move the needle.
It really was interesting, how we're divided and we're just running on confirmation bias. And what I was writing about this morning, we're just meme brains. Like I meet a lot of people that they base a lot of their political knowledge on memes. Like literally, it's like TikTok brain. And so you'll talk to people and you'll be like, well, what about, this political person did this? Like, I don't know. Or I saw a meme the other day and it said this. And I'm like, you're really basing your whole Dunning-Kruger brain on memes? And like, I mean, MSNBC, I love, it's good journalism. There's good people on there, but sometimes it just turns into what SNL billed as impeachment porn. I mean, and I realized after watching MSNBC for a long time that it's just confirmation bias to people who actually give a shit and maybe follow the news every day or want to follow the news every day. But most people don't, and they don't care. They're more interested in what Kim Kardashian is fucking doing every day than with her ass than, and her clothes and whatever perfume she's wearing today. And like, who gives a shit? Than what's going on in their lives that impact their kitchen table politics.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the 1920s, I mean, journalism was actually explicitly or openly partisan. A newspaper would be a proudly Republican paper or a proudly Democratic paper, but there was a certain amount of accountability. The papers would respond to each other. If you go to a park, this was before social media. People would stand up literally on a soapbox and talk, and people could counter, right? People could answer. Yeah. But what was happening in journalism at the time, and it's still with us today, is journalism was starting to become the term then was jazz journalism, which really fits with the era. But jazz journalism. But journalism was becoming there were more giant screaming headlines. There were photos were starting to appear in newspapers. People were becoming more obsessed with, like sex, crime, money. Those were the big issues that drove news, that drove the news cycle. And
that's just Fridays, Wheeler, right? Yeah, that's just Fridays around my house. Sex, crime, and money.
But Senator Wheeler saw that was happening, and he exploited that. And he pointed out. I mean, he took pleasure in dragging witnesses before his Senate committee, like bootleggers, like convicted felons, and showing that they were associated with the sitting Attorney General of the United States. That was a pretty effective tactic, and it really, that's why his investigation resonated so well. He was willing to play to that the public's thirst for salacious details and sensation.
Well, I mean, maybe January 6th committee should have done that. They should have. I don't know how you get more salacious stuff. I got nothing. I got nothing on that lead in. So, any other tease outs of the book you want to touch on or tell us about, or maybe things that you learned when you were going through the research on the book?
I mean, I learned so much. I learned, a lot about the arcane details of prohibition, but more especially like how people got around prohibition. And it turns out the Attorney General, along with the Attorney General, was involved in that in his early years and early months in office. Prohibition outlawed the sale or distribution of intoxicating liquors, but it didn't abolish property rights. And there was already a ton of whiskey and other spirits that had been produced in the United States. So that all that whiskey was sitting in warehouses that were actually supervised by the Treasury Department. They were government bonded warehouses. Yeah. And that liquor could only be withdrawn for permissible uses, which included, like medicinal uses, export to foreign countries. And you had to get just a government officer to sign some form saying, oh yeah, you can withdraw it. This is legitimate. So the Attorney General got involved in brokering these signatures on the government forms to get to get the liquor, not into doctors' hands or exported to Britain, but basically in speakeasies. So America kept drinking because thanks to Attorney General Harry Daugherty.
That is crazy, man. Well, that explains a lot of what was going on in that time, and a lot of things that were going on with the Roaring '20s. And did you find that any of it was helped fuel the lead up to the big crash in the Great Depression?
Well, I'm not sure that there's a direct connection between this. Obviously, America was just sort of living this collectively this hedonistic lifestyle, and but that ultimately had to come to some sort of sobering conclusion. And I guess you could say that was the crash. But this all happened, about 5-6 years before then.
Mm-hmm. Well, there you go. I mean, it was a crazy time. It was an interesting time, but I think what's also interesting is how it shaped, like you say, the Justice Department brought us J. Edgar Hoover, and it's always interesting to me, like the shit that America pulls in its history. Like we try and do the right thing, and then it ends up being, a Pandora's box where it opens up power, corruption, and stuff, and it leads down. It starts out on the good path, and everyone's like, "Yay, it's good path," and then it goes dark. I saw that with social media. We saw that, there's a lot of stuff the CIA has been involved in, and other things that start out, as a kind of a nice idea, and then you're like, "Oh, we're assassinating people around the world," and Bin Laden, we funded Bin Laden, and then he turns against us, and you look at stuff in Ecuador and all around the world, all through different presidentials, administrations and stuff. And it's interesting how we're always trying to put our finger on the scale and do the good, right, moral thing. And it ends up not being so moral. So it's kind of interesting how we, this is why history is important. If we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it.
Well said. Well said.
There you go. So anything more you want to tease out about the book before we go, or give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, I guess I'll just mention one more thing. I mean, there's sort of a murder mystery wrapped up in all of this too. The book starts with a mysterious death or suspicious death of the Attorney General's roommate and probably lover, a man named Jess Smith, who was found with a bullet wound to the head in the Attorney General's apartment in Washington, D.C. And he was, it's revealed that it was really actually no secret. It was an open secret at the time that this man was essentially Harry Daugherty's go-between. He was the man who brokered the deals. Because Harry Daugherty was he was the bagman. Yeah, Harry Daugherty was a smooth operator. He knew he could never be seen in the same room with a bootlegger or a convicted felon trying to get, or somebody trying to get a pardon. But his friend could. And and when the book really kicks off when this man is found dead in the Attorney General's apartment, and nobody really knows what happened.
Murder, you say?
Possibly.
Murder. That's interesting, and I mean, think of the bagman with the famous bagman with Nixon. All this stuff that goes on, dirty politics, but it's important that the political or that the American public, really think about this stuff and understand stuff. More and more, I've tried to convey to, I don't know, anyone who'll listen to my idiot brain that, as Americans, we need to pay attention to this stuff and we need to call it out. We need to not, like I said, it was interesting to me to watch Trump's town hall. I believe it was in Ohio or Michigan last night with CNN. And it was interesting to watch. CNN did an interview after of Trump voters, and they just really don't give a shit about anything. He was so correct in 2015 when he said I could murder somebody on Fifth Avenue and no one would care. Like somehow they did the polling on that, and it's true. And it's part of the problem of when I talk about like this meme sort of stuff. But you watch, it was just endless corruption, day after day corruption going on in the White House during his presidential term. And no one cared. No one even paid attention. Like half the time, if you talk to a Trump voter, you go, well, what about that? They're like, oh, I don't know much about that. When it really comes down to it, you really nail them down. They don't follow anything what he does. And which is the great thing that, you know, people have been doing to steal from the poor and the average people, you know, billionaires, rich people, all these years. They go, look over there. Hey, the immigrants are stealing from you. Well, they pick your pockets and clean out your bank accounts. So, you know, it's interesting how, you know, these scandals just keep going and going and going, and no one ever learns. But, you know, at least the Justice Department got a little bit better. I think under William Barr, they were tied up a little bit. You know, I know the Southern District of New York was tied up a little bit. They couldn't do what they wanted, but corruption, the game that never ends in American politics.
Isn't that right?
Yeah. Well, hopefully, you know, through your book and other stories, people get wiser in the American public and demand better. The jokes just keep coming, but please, God, make it stop. So thank you very much, Nathan, for coming on the show. This has been very insightful and a fun book read. Give us your .com or your .me, I should say, so that people can find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's nathanmasters.me.
There you go. There you go. So, Nathan, thank you very much for coming on. It's been fun.
Yeah, and, sorry, we had some technical difficulties, but thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I think the audio is dropping just a little bit. So thank you for coming on the show. Thanks to be honest for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places on the interwebs. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time. And that should have us out, Nathan.